welcome back to the channel. My name is Ida Bond from lightcycleastrology.com, and today we are taking a look at the astrology for the upcoming opposition that is forming between the planet Mercury and Jupiter right around August the 30th of 2022. Now, the reason why we are taking a look at this aspect is because even though technically this aspect does not fall within the calendar month of September, this particular aspect for that month, for the astrology of September, is basically, in my view, it is the biggest aspect. It is the aspect that everything else kind of culminates around. It seems to be like a month just in general where sometimes you get months where you take a look at the astrology, all of the different planetary aspects that are forming from the beginning to the end of the month, or as I like to do it, from the new moon to the next new moon. And sometimes you get astrology that for that particular cycle that is kind of chaotic. It's all over the place. There's a lot of different things happening between a lot of different planets. This month is very, very in my opinion, it's really unique because it seems like everything is supporting or somehow being tied into this opposition that we're going to be talking about today. Even the full moon, generally, which I sort of consider to be the culminative moment of the lunar cycle, and even the sun and the moon, which I normally consider to almost hold the status that this particular aspect holds. I usually think of the luminaries as kind of the foundational planets that are forming the stage that all of the monthly astrology is happening on top of. But in this particular month, even the luminaries seem to be being tied in or supporting this opposition between Mercury and Jupiter. So this is a really, really big point to understand if you want to sort of get a grasp on the astrology for the coming cycle ahead. And so in my opinion, this is where we have to start. This is the beginning of the foundational perspective that we have to try to understand to get some sense of what is happening for the astrology in September. It is this opposition between Mercury that is currently in the sign of Libra, making that opposition over to Jupiter, who is currently and still going retrograde in the sign of Aries. So let me go ahead and bring up the real-time clock here, and we can see that. All right, so here now I've got... Let me just get some annotation going so you can see the planets in question here. So you've got Jupiter over here in Aries, and you've got Mercury over here in Libra. And these two planets are, it's really Mercury that's the faster moving planet. So we could really say that Mercury is applying to perfect an opposition over to Jupiter. Jupiter is currently going retrograde, but you can see that Mercury is at 4 degrees and 2 minutes, and Jupiter is at 7 degrees and 2 minutes. So this is that 3-degree range that we are saying once Mercury gets within 3 degrees of that oppositional aspect to Jupiter, that's within the effect range. And then Jupiter and Mercury will eventually, get to their exact oppositional degree points, and then Mercury will move forward just a little bit by about 10 arc minutes outside of that 3-degree range of separation to the opposition to Jupiter, and then will actually station retrograde during September and begin to walk back into that opposition. During that time where Mercury is starting to slow down to turn retrograde, the full moon comes along, and the full moon this month happens in the sign of Virgo and Pisces. Well, the full moon happens in the sign of Pisces, but the luminaries are in the signs of Virgo and Pisces. So that is really, really interesting because Mercury is the temple lord that is responsible for the planets that wander into Virgo, right? Mercury is at home in the sign of Virgo and is playing the host to any gods that come along. So that is going to be the sun. And Jupiter is the temple lord of the sign for Pisces. So any planets that are in Pisces will also be being hosted by Jupiter. So this opposition not only walks into an exact range and then begins to move slightly out of range, just a touch, just a tiny, tiny bit. Then Mercury stations retrogrades, which starts to pull that opposition back into effect. Right as that is happening, we have the culminative moment of the full moon, and both of the lights are in signs that are being hosted by both of these gods. So that is how you could really see this month, just in general, really having so much to do with this one particular aspect. So that's what we're going to go ahead and talk about. Let's get into it. So first of all, I think it's probably a good idea to define Mercury. What does Mercury represent? Well, Mercury is a god that rules both the signs of Gemini and the signs of Virgo, right? Now, the sign of Gemini is the sign that comes before the summer solstice. The summer solstice happens right at the beginning of Cancer or at the end of Gemini. And Virgo is the sign that comes before the beginning of fall. So both of these signs have to do with light moving towards a place that gets taken apart. Something gets taken apart. The light is decreasing. Once the summer solstice is attained, light starts to diminish. Even though we're in the light half of the year, we're in the summery, very bright time of the year. The summer solstice is the moment that light begins to start to wrestle with an increase of darkness from that point forward that eventually leads us into the fall time. So Mercury is the heralding sign that comes before that begins to dismantle the light. Virgo is the time that comes before the fall. The fall is the time that essentially is a season where we begin the dark sixth month half of the year. So that means that there are going to be more minutes of darkness in one 24-hour period than there are minutes of light in that same 24-hour period. So that happens at the autumnal equinox, which is the beginning of Libra. So Virgo is right before Libra and Gemini is right before Cancer. Both signs are ruled by a god that takes apart the rising or the continuing dominance of light. Both signs have to do with sort of checking light and pulling light down. And in the sense of Libra, darkness even overcomes light altogether and becomes dominant. So that is the deepest fundamental idea behind the god of Mercury. So Mercury, in essence, represents a tendency towards entropy. So we have Mercury representing entropy. Entropy simply means that things become atomized, things become taken apart. It sort of reminds me of like, I don't know if you ever seen like anything on stars or anything, but stars, once a star dies, it will explode. And out of that explosion, all of the minerals, all of the gold and all of the atomic minerals, they get exploded out into space. Now, gravity will essentially pull them back together and form new stars and form new planets and what have you. So it's the same thing in the winter time or in the fall time. The leaves begin to fall, then the snow comes and the cold comes because it's the cold time of year, right? So things begin to die. But as things die, they break apart. Now, why is it important to have this oscillation between things that are like living and things that get broken down, that death, darkness period? It's because once something is formed, it can only withstand the pressures of material reality, the forces of gravity, the forces of erosion, all of these forces of age and time. They eventually corrode something that is structured and put together and living. And it needs to be broken down so that it can go through a period of atomization, so that at some point there can be more order that collects up those individual atomized pieces and puts them back together into a new form. So essentially, entropy makes possible new life or life to continue in the form of new forms. And this sort of is a go around against the forces of nature, bearing down on some living organism or some structure or order within the material universe that can only withstand those forces so long. So that is, I know that's kind of a lot to take in, but Mercury represents this this planet, this god that says there is a necessity that we need to bring back the darkness. We need to move back into a place that leads us into entropy. We need to move towards death temporarily so that we can eventually reincarnate. So that is Mercury in this part of the opposition. The other part of the opposition is Jupiter. So let's talk about the opposition just for a second. So an opposition, whenever you see an opposition within astrology, what you are talking about is you're talking about two fundamentally opposite things like hot and cold, day and night, light and darkness. We're talking about two things that cannot be synthesized together in any way. If it's nighttime, it's not daytime. If it's daytime, it's not nighttime. Even when we have things like the full moon, that's just the light, kind of bouncing off the surface of the moon. And there is some light at the nighttime, but fundamentally, nighttime is something different than daytime. So that is the nature of an opposition. So let me just go ahead and share screen again real quick so we can bring this back up. But you can see that this opposition between Jupiter and Mercury, what that is, because they're directly opposite of the circle, you're talking about Mercury being representing something that is fundamentally one thing, and then you have Jupiter on the other side saying, hey, I'm the opposite of that. So you can define one by the other and vice versa. So we have two things that are like hot and cold or day and night. So if Mercury represents that necessity towards entropy that allows things to be broken down so that at some point they can reincarnate into new forms of order, what does Jupiter represent? The exact opposite of that. So Jupiter represents things that are brought back together. If Mercury is the exploded star that blasts all the atomized pieces out into the cosmos, Jupiter is the gravity that eventually coalesces them and brings them back into a system of order. That's why Jupiter was a benefic in ancient astrology, because within society, Jupiter represented the order of society, the order of law, or the order of the cosmos, the order of morality or justice or laws or systems of growth and abundance. That's because fundamentally, if we didn't have a world where there was some kind of ordered government, some kind of ordered religion or law, it would be like a dog eat dog world, law of the jungle, Lord of the Flies, and that would not be considered good. So now I know what you're thinking. Well, religion, that's not always good. Right, that may be true. So whenever you have Jupiter, remember Jupiter in mythological terms was a god that could be corrupted. So it's not to say that there aren't inherent problems when we try to bring, some type of government that allows us to all coexist together. There's going to be some corruption, of course, and that's what Jupiter mythologically spoke to. But it's just that without any type of system or law and order, without any type of cohesion where we can have some concept of right and wrong or God and the devil or, what have you, like laws against thievery or what have you, Jupiter represented that concept that says some kind of order, albeit even if it has flaws, it's got to be better than Lord of the Flies. So Jupiter is the concept of things coming back to some sense of order for that brings a sense of goodness. So that's what we have. We have entropy, disorder, some lead into darkness and into death. And we have Jupiter, which is sort of the reincarnated birth, the system coming back together, something good that is forming, something ordered and just that is forming. So those are the two things, right? And they're opposite to each other. Now, all we have to do is plug this into the signs to get a sense of what kind of entropy and what kind of order are we talking about. Well, Mercury is being hosted by Venus because Venus rules Libra, and Jupiter is being hosted by Mars because Mars rules Aries. So you could see on a personal level, you could see things sort of tending toward that place that things had to be broken down with Venus things, right? So this could be something like some concept of beauty, of personal beauty. This could be some concept of vanity, or something that is unjust becomes ugly, and Venus wants something to be beautiful. It wants something to be kind of precise, and it wants things to be fair. So you could see certain Venusian qualities where there could be an old system of what is considered to be fair or beautiful or just. Those things could be tending towards some entropic state, something that needs to be broken down so that it can be reformed at some point in the future. Now, interestingly enough, it doesn't seem like we have to wait in this particular example, because Jupiter in the sign of Aries represents that emerging form, that thing that's being brought together. Now, I get the sense that because we're talking about Aries, we might not even understand what it is that is forming or emerging right now. There's some system of justice, some system of order, some new religion, some new morality, some new good cohesive concept that is emerging, and it has the right of birthright to do that. It's coming together, but it's so young in the sign of Aries, a springtime energy, that we might not fully even understand what it is yet. But that is the fundamental tension that we're dealing with when we come to this month, because something in our lives needs to fundamentally kind of go the way of the dinosaurs, and something is like man, walking out of Africa and evolving into Homo sapien sapien. It has this sense that there's something becoming extinct and something emerging in from the primordial cosmos, and it's happening all at once. So those are like the higher levels of it. But on a personal level, you could see, let's say, there's some notion of markets and justice. There could be some notion of spending money on things that are unnecessary. And it may be on the personal level, Jupiter represents something that is emerging, like some kind of new routine that we want to put into place that has something to do with maybe getting in shape or getting a new job or new career. It could be anything new that provides some cohesive system of order that seems to be good, right? That is the big energy of the month. Everything is culminating around that. Now, let's go ahead and just move the clock forward just a little bit, because I want to show you what happens around the full moon. Now, I am also going to be making a full moon video, but if you watch the moon here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. We've got Mercury now stationing to turn retrograde, right as we have the exact full moon here in Pisces taking place. So remember, Mercury is the host of the temple of Virgo. So Mercury is hosting and providing the sun with mercurial things, and it's Venusian mercurial things. And the moon is being hosted by Jupiter. So Jupiter is providing the moon with Marsy Jupiterian types of things. So I think that this really has to do with, you could concretize it, I suppose, and say that, it could mean exactly this or this in a person's life. But in the broad strokes, this timing, because you have Mercury stationing to turn retrograde and then going back into that exact alignment with Jupiter at the time that the month culminates with the full moon, a time where things, the lunar phases kind of expand out and become ripe, and then they contract back in. So right as that expansion is full, right as the pregnant mother's belly becomes full and ripe and is ready to start contracting out the baby, you have Mercury stationing to turn retrograde. So to me, this really, really speaks to this process where you have to go through this tension of Mercury and Jupiter. So some tension around Mercury and Venus. Maybe it's relationships. Maybe it's you're trying to figure out how to improve a relationship so that it can last and be like a more long-term relationship versus maybe just like a fling or something casual. Maybe there is something casual that you're involved with that you want to sort of get rid of so that you can allow something more permanent in that is social in your life in nature, has something to do with loving yourself or providing money for you and your partner or something Venusian like that. Maybe it's some kind of social dynamic where there's some gossip and there's this superficial kind of Libran gossip or news or something like that, and then there's this oppositional tension with Jupiter that says, hey, that's not really appropriate any longer because we're trying to be somebody different, be somebody better. We're trying to come out and have a new regimen that brings something good and order to our lives. So there could be some kind of tension like that works out. And then right as the full moon comes along, that's the moment where probably whatever it is that is going on around us, the events sort of time in to culminate and bring us that aha moment that allows us to then begin to go back and develop this, walk back into this tension with Jupiter and Mercury, and we can develop whatever is forming in sort of a new way with that Jupiter in Aries part of the sky, and also to let go of things that we're working with in that Mercury Libran part of the sky, if that makes sense. So, so that is sort of the tension that we're working with this month. And it's a really cool month because it has such a focused concentration on one particular theme. It's this Jupiter Mercury theme. It's not like just we're getting pulled all sorts of different places from all different kinds of aspects, and there's different archetypal themes just pulling us all over the place. It seems to be, there is a little bit of that, but it seems to be more or less, it's like everybody's working in concert to bring us into this tension. And tensions are good because if you think about the tension between that sexual tension between the polarities, not that you can't have that between a woman and a woman and a man, but just saying that polarity between the different yin and yang or the different sexes tends to create that new third thing, that new life form. That is a positive thing because we could work with this tension, figure out what it is that we need to let go with, potentially something to do with Venus, relationships, vanity, something that is seemingly superficial, something social in our life that just isn't serving us any longer in a good way. And what are we bringing in? What is the thing that is emerging with some very, very powerful force to cut through the soil and sprout up, that we probably don't fully understand yet, but whatever it is, it's happening in a big way because it's Jupiter. So that is the good potential that comes from working with a tension like that, is there's going to be something that is fertily brought into existence, and that's the meditation. So I think it's going to be I'm really excited to see what happens this month because it is so concentrated within this one aspect. So that's what I have for this particular aspect, but it's a big one. And I think the next thing that is coming up is going to be the first quarter moon that is happening on September the 3rd. So that'll be the next video that I'll try to tackle here for the astrology of September. So thanks for watching, everybody. Take care, and I'll see you real soon. Bye.